Hello, glad to see that you are here. And finally, I'm able to record this video. It took a long time for me to bring pieces together. And now we are able to talk about every single detail about this keyword. One of the most scariest thing maybe in the JavaScript. Why? Because you usually don't see complete guide about this keyword. Some people mention about some part of it and forget about the other parts, and this is why we always think we grasp it, but when we encounter with something else we didn't see, we stuck. And I believe I bring most of things that you are going to encounter about this topic so that you're really going to master it. And you can see we are going to talk about so many things about in here and step by step, so don't hurry. Just take a coffee, step back and smile and enjoy, of course. Also, just because this lecture is about this keyword, you might heard this many times in this lecture. This is not because I'm intentionally doing this. This is because about this lecture about this keyword. So let's get started. Last thing, please before every single example, try to pause and think about it. This is a really key part for you to really understand, and I'm still doing this by my own. In first part, I'm going to give you the big picture, the thing that you really should care, and the thing that you really focus. And I will give you some syntax so that you are going to see in the examples this syntax. And this is how you are going to be aware how it's going to act differently. First of all, we say every function has this keyword. Why? Because every function, when it's run, it's create an execution context, and this execution context has this keyword. If you don't know execution context, you don't have to know right now, but what you have to know, every single function when you run, it has this keyword. And the second and the most important, this keyword is dynamic. Never forget that, okay? And this is the whole point of this video. If it wasn't dynamic, if it was something static, this video wouldn't exist. This topic wouldn't exist in JavaScript land. And this keyword, by being dynamic, gives extremely powerful things in the language. This keyword and the prototype inheritance, one of the most brain hurt things in the JavaScript land. Okay, next one is arrow functions. Never forget, arrow function is going to act differently than regular functions, what I'm saying in here. And essentially, arrow functions, this keyword, it's going to be related with its parent element. We're going to see the examples, don't worry. This one, I don't think that it's really important, but you should have knowledge about it. Inside any function, if you use strict and this keyword, by using this use strict, it's going to act differently than the usual. And in here, we just give an example. If the function on the global scope, and if you use the use strict in it, it's going to be undefined rather than to be global scope like window object. Don't worry if you don't get, we are going to cover this. And these are also really important, and I'm going to give the examples below. We have function invocation, method invocation, and constructor invocation. Each of this, when we invoke the functions, this keyword is going to act differently. Never forget that. It's going to act differently based on these things. By knowing this knowledge, you already have the big picture right now. And whenever you see these things, you say, oh, okay, this keyword is going to act differently, so I must aware. Or when you see the arrow function, this is going to open your eyes. Now let's start about simple examples. We say this keyword equal window on the global scope. Because global scope, we have global execution context, and that global execution context has this keyword, and this keyword equal window in there. This is why it's true. What you have to know in here, on the global scope, this keyword is going to be window object. That's all. And also, before I forget, this is really important if you don't know. When you declare something with the var or the function keywords in the JavaScript, it's going to bind to the window object when you do on the global. But if you do let or const, it's not going to bind the window object. This is important if you don't know. So var and function is going to bind the window, and let and const will not bind to window. Even if the let and const on the global, it's not going to bind the window. Let's move. What I'm saying in here, we have an object, as you can see, and it has a method. So when we invoke this method, it will have this keyword and it will have some specific way to act. This is what I'm saying, okay? This is a syntax that you should aware. The next one is just regular function, and it has also this keyword. And the next one is construction function, and it has its own this keyword. And as you can see, we use new keyword to invoke it, to make an instance of it. In here, we have an object again. We have a method inside, and inside we have a function. And this function is this keyword might act differently. Next one, we have again an object, a method, but with the arrow syntax, as you can see. This is an arrow function, and it's this keyword. Remember what we said, it's going to be parent, but don't worry about this. We are going to cover it. Now, the first part is finished. We see the big picture, we see the examples, we see how we should be aware about this keyword is going to act in different way with the syntax. And now we are going to talk immediately about examples so that you really know what it's going to happen to this keyword when we use in different way. I try to make the examples as much as possible in order. Some examples are similar to each other, some are really unique. Just stick with the examples and try to think about them. Eventually you are really going to get the point. And this is the whole point about this video, to understand topic really well. Now let's get into examples. Now let's start with simple things, and then we are going to mix things after we master it. In here we have an object, and that object has a method, and it's try to like this keyword. In JavaScript, when you invoke a function, you always have to have a mindset that who is invoking this function. This is the number one key. Who is invoking this function? But this logic sometimes can trick you. Just be aware that, but we are going to cover this also. Now, simple rule. Who is calling this function? When we check our code, as you can see, we are invoking our function in here, and we say, hey, get me the name. And who is calling this? It's object. So since the object who is calling this method, and since this is just a regular function, this keyword is going to be whoever calls it. In this case, it's object. So what is object? Is this. All right. So when you ask this is going to point to entire object, because the one who calls it this object itself. This is why we say it's dynamic and it's going to change. Remember, this is regular function. Let's just save. I guess you got the point, because with the examples it's going to make more sense. Let's save it. And as you can see, it's point that. You can do is this equal to object, and save. It's going to give you true. Let's move to the other example. In here, as you can see, it's extremely similar, but we are using the arrow function. And as you remember what I said about the arrow function, we said that this keyword is going to be parent. So in this case, this rule, whoever calls it for the arrow function, doesn't exist. So when you see arrow function, the one who calls doesn't matter. The thing that matter is the parent element in this case. So you have to ask yourself, who is the parent of this? If you say it's object, you get wrong, because object doesn't have this keyword. And this is why the parent is going to be global. So you are going to ask yourself, what is global this keyword? And of course it's window, remember? And this is why inside here it's going to be window. It's not going to be this object, whoever calls it, remember? This rule is not exist for the arrow functions. This is extremely important. I think you got this. Let's save this. Let's see this. You can see we log it and we got the window object, as you can see. Let's go to other example. In here, we have really good and common example that you are going to see many times. And I'm going to explain to you the easiest way to understand how it works. Now, when we check our code, we have an object and we invoke the method from that object. And as you remember, we said who is calling this is important. But also I said sometimes it's tricky, so don't rely this rule all the time. Just check your code and know what you're doing. If you rely on this rule all the time, you might wrong. I mean, it's not wrong rule, but as you can see in this example, you will see what I'm trying to say. So when we are invoking it, who is invoking it? It's object3. So when we check the method, first of all, we should know that this is the regular function. So being a regular and being an array function is different. So since this is a regular function, remember it will have this keyword. This function has its own this keyword. And this keyword, as you remember, what it will be, you have to ask yourself this, what is this right now? It's going to be whoever calls it, right? So who calls this? It's object3. So you can say it's going to be object3 in your mind. Get name, this keyword is going to point to object3 because object3 calls it. Okay, let's move. Now we have another function inside that function, and that another function is just a regular function. And in here, we running the function. Remember, now we running this function inside here, not outside or somewhere else. And the thing that triggered this one is not this one, is this one. This is why we have to check this one in order to answer what is this is going to be. And now we are focusing on here, not here. All right. When you check this, you see that it's nothing that calls it. When situation like this, it's going to point to window. It's going to point to global. So this is why, remember we said each function will have its own this keyword. This keyword is going to point to the window object because it's regular function. And now let's save and let's refresh. You see it's window. We can do also like this. You got through. I think you got the point. Let's move the other example. In this question is very similar, but please try to pause and think about this and answer it. Now, as you can see, we invoke the object from this method and it is a regular function. And since it's regular function, this keyword is going to point what? It's going to point this one. So it's going to be object4 in this case. And now we have a function and we run it. But this function is arrow function. And remember arrow function, it's going to point to parent. In this case, what is the parent? The question is this, what is the parent? What is the parent, right? Well, the parent, the one who has this keyword inside. And if you go one up level, you're going to see that we have the getName function, and the getName function, since it's function, it's going to have this keyword. And since it has this keyword and inside this arrow function, this is going to point also the object4. This is why, remember, we normally we said who is calling this, right? But in arrow, that rule wasn't exist. That rule is not exist about arrow function. This is why this keyword is going to point object 4 in here. Let's save, let's see. And yeah, we got, since this is the object and it only has gets name function inside, we can do this also. Object 4. Is this true? Save. Yes, it's true. Let's go to other example. In here, I'm trying to explain the use strict, how it's work. Remember, I said you can use strict inside the function. If you ask what is use strict is just a way to write more secure code in the JavaScript. So it's going to automatically behind the scene prevent some weird things that happen behind the scene, and it give you a warning or the error for that thing. So you will able to write more secure code. This is what use strict mean. Now in here we have just regular function and we invoke it with the window test function. Remember we said test function is going to, whenever we declare a function, is going to point a window in the JavaScript. Let's see, we run and we get this keyword as the window and we get true. If also you do this, you're going to see that it's going to be the same. Now in here we are using the use strict, and as you remember, when we talked at first, part 1, we said when we use use strict, it's not going to be window, it's going to be undefined, because we are using use strict. You're not going to see this too much because I think use strict is usually using on the model, not inside the functions. And let's comment this, and I will talk about something else. And we got error. What's happened? Oh, okay. Now this is point to undefined, and we say, hey, is undefined equal window? No, it's not. But I'm going to talk about something weird that is going to happen now. I usually see the people give this example, but I did something and you're not going to expect to happen. What if I do this? And I haven't seen that somebody mentioned about this, but I just want to show you. Remember, we said whenever we declare a function, it's going to point a window and it's going to be existing on the window. In here, we explicitly say, hey, run this function on the window. And we save. Wow. We use strict. Even if we use strict, it's still act normal behavior, which means this points to the window. Even though we use strict, it's now pointed to the window. Why? Well, this is a good question, and honestly, I don't know 100%, but I'm going to give my idea about this. If you really know what it is, why the reason why it's act like this, you can explain. I will be appreciative about reading it. But my thought is when you use like this, what's happened, it's try to catch that function by prototype chain, and it reach it and it access it and it run it. But when it's run it, it's run without the window. Like it's there, but it doesn't explicitly run with the window. And this is different. They are different things. I mean, at the end, they are same function, but they will act different for this keyword. And I think this is why when we explicitly say window.function, it's going to point to window. This is my idea based on my knowledge of the JavaScript, but you might give us some other good reason, maybe, I don't know. But this is not the point, it's not really important for us to stick this problem, because it's not going to affect our knowledge about this keyword that we are going to talk. This is just something good to know about. Let's move. In here we have just simple function expression, and we try to create an instance from it. and we are trying to guess, well, what is this keyword. Remember, new keyword is extremely important in the JavaScript and it does a lot of things for you, and I'm going to briefly talk about this. When you use new keyword, it essentially creates a new object in here, and it's connect this object with this headset function prototype. So this is why it has connection between them. It's like it has prototype chain between these two prototype. You know, this prototype is going to be bind to this. And then we can refer that object we create behind the scene with the this keyword. So whatever we do in here, it's going to add this newly created object. So we just in here, we add some property, and behind the scene, what's happened, it's going to return that thing. You know, behind the scene, it's going to return that this is what it's happened. This is why we can have an object in here. If you really want to know how this works, I explain everything about this in the prototype inheritance video. You're going to get really good knowledge about this. I really recommend that you watch it. Okay, this is why we have this, and when we save, what we get that object, this object, the newly created object. This is why we get headset whatever. And as you can see, we also have a prototype chain. If you do this, if we save, it's going to be empty object, as you can see. Let's move. In here, we are going to understand call, apply, and bind. Don't worry, they are extremely easy. When I first see this, I was, why these things exist, and why everything is so complex? Well, first we have to understand the idea behind these things, why they exist. Remember, what we said about this keyword, it's dynamic. And up until now, we see how it acts. But now, with these three things, we can have control over this keyword. The whole idea about this is having control about this keyword. For instance, you want to be this something else. Yeah, and these things are doing this. So basically, when you use these things, you are able to change this, whatever you want. Let's see with the examples, you're really going to understand that because it's really easy. You see that we have object 1 and object 2, and both of them have first name, but different names, right? Now, when I do object 1 that gets name normally, what it's going to do, it's going to act like this, and it would be object 1, right? Let's see. Yeah, we got object 1, as you can see. But now, there is something called call, okay? If you do call, it has first argument, and it says you can pass me this. So whatever you pass in here, for instance, if I pass object 1, it's again going to be object 1 because we pass object 1. But if I pass object 2, it's going to be object 2. You see, it's changed. Now we able to change this keyword by using call. That's all. That's the main idea about these things. And the other thing that you really should know, it's really easy. Let's say the other parameters. Let's say it has XYZ, right? And you can pass 1, 2, 3 to there like this. So this 1, 2, 3 is going to be XYZ, and you can use it because it has these parameters. This is all it means. And when it's come to for the apply, okay, apply, it's extremely similar to call. So let's remove this 3, okay? Right now they are equal to each other when we do this. But the difference is, just remember we do 1, 2, 3 in here. For the apply, we pass in array like 1, 2, 3. This is all. This is all you need to know. But for now, don't focus about the passing parameters because it's really easy. And the main idea is about to controlling this keyword. Okay, we just remove these things and this thing. We are going to focus on this keyword. Right now we pass object 2 and it's became object 2. If it was object 3, 4, 5, whatever you pass in here, let's say you pass window, okay, we pass window, we save, now it's become window. This is how it's going to work. When it's come to bind, it's a bit different, but it's really same logic. Remember what we do in here, we invoke the function, right? We call it, we invoking it. In here, when we do object one, just copy this and do bind. Yeah, just object 2. Let's do this. What bind does, it's make the copy for you, but whatever you pass in here, it's going to be this, and it's make the copy of the object. So if you do const a equal like this, and if you console.log a and you save, you got the function because you copied this function, but this function, this keyword is going to be whatever you pass in here. So it's not going to be something whoever calls or whatever. It's going to be whatever you pass in here. So right now we have a function just like this, and it's this keyword is object 2. Now when I invoke a, okay, I'm invoking a, it's going to point to this no matter what, because we created like this. We're going to see some examples about this, but this is just introduction. Okay, so now we save, and as you can see, it's point to what? Object 2, because we pass object 2 there. This is whole point about the call, apply, and bind, nothing fancy. And the other thing that you just do is the passing arguments. If the function has arguments, parameter or whatever. Let's see some examples about this that we cover. In here we do this, but actually since it's just console log, when it's returned, it's going to be return undefined. So if we do return this, now we can have better understanding. Now we do object 1 get name, and what is this? Is going to be object 1. In here we do call, since we do call object 1, it's going to be object 1 again, because we explicitly say, hey, that this keyword is going to be object 1 because we want this to be. But normally it's also going to be 1, but just an example to see, okay? We save, we run, it's going to be true. Now in here, remember I said the apply and call is really similar. And now we see, we just apply object 1 and we do object 1, and it's going to be what? It's going to be true because we didn't change anything. And in here we doing just bind with the object 2 as we saw before, and we store it and we invoke it, and it's going to return this since we not logging anything. But if you want to log, it's Gomez, just don't confuse. I just is returned to this keyword. In this case, it's object 2. So if you do const b equal and you do console log b, it's going to give you the object 2 because we stored it. Oh, in here I want to talk about the idea why we pass null, and usually when you do bind, when you don't care about this keyword, they pass null or undefined. Usually they pass null, and I'm just going to briefly talk about this idea why we pass null, because when you pass null and undefined, it's going to point to window. So basically when we do this, for instance, if you do this, and if you do null, it's going to be window. Now, if I save, it's going to be window. This is the whole idea. But in here, sometimes you might see that people can trick you. Like, what if I pass 7 let's do this call and see the log. Let's just console log this and see what's happened. We pass the number. We save. It just gives us the number in here. This is point to the normally not you expect to be 6, but it's convert to behind scene its constructor function, like it's create its instance. Just saying new, let's say const a equal new number, or whatever number you pass, and this number you pass. And if you do console log a or console log a equal this, save. Well, it didn't give us the true because the memory reference is different. Don't get confused, just if you don't know what I'm talking about. But essentially what it does, it takes this number and it creates its instance behind the scene, and it gives you that one. This is why we get the number 6 or whatever. If you pass the string like this, you get the string version like this. But usually you never do this. I didn't see that something people does this. You just pass the null. So you might think, instead of I pass null, why I just don't pass number or something, and don't do this. This is what I'm saying. Just pass null so that you will know that it's going to point to the window. Now we finished part 2 and we move to part 3, and part 3 is going to be kind of mixed exercises, and some of them is going to be similar that we see, some of them is going to be a bit difficult. I just prepare for them so that you can really see things, how it's work. You can practice, you can see how logic works. It has good examples inside, and we are going to see all of these. If you're tired, just take a break and come back later. Welcome back. Now let's see what's happening in this example. We have a function and we have a property, and its property refer to this function, and this function is this one, and it's arrow function, as you can see. I will remove this one right now, and I want you to guess this one, these things. We covered this, and hopefully you can answer them. If not, let's move together. Now, what we say, we just initialize this property, which is a function and arrow function, and we say, is it equal to window? What we know about the arrow function, that it's going to point to window object, right? So this is going to be window. That's true because we returned this. The down example, we just call with undefined. Remember, if we don't pass anything, it's going to be undefined, and since it's undefined, it's going to be window. Normally we have to calculate this in our mind fast, so it's going to be window. But the reason of it's window, not because we do undefined, because as you can see at the down, we pass the as object. Remember, we said this is true, and in here we say, hey, is this going to be as object? While remember, this is a arrow function, and the only thing that it cares is the parent, this. So the parent, this is going to be window still. Even if you call with some other thing, it's not going to be that one. So let's save and see. Remember, we said this is true, and it's true, and then second one is also it's true, and yes, but the third one is false. Why? Because the arrow function only cares about the parent this, so it doesn't care about what you call, what you give. It doesn't obey this thing. And if you do is this equal window, it's going to be yes, it's window. Let's do a fast example about the bind so we can see how it's going to work with the bind also. If we say const a equal s object and silly prop dot bind, and then we pass that object again. Remember, this is going to be a function, so if you do console log a, it's going to be a function, so you have to invoke it in order to see what's going to happen. And if we do console log this, now we can inspect it. Now in here we console log a, which is the function, and that function this is going to be window. It's not going to be this one, because remember, it's arrow function, and its arrow function doesn't obey the bind, call, whatever. Now we understand this. I'm going to remove this one, and we're going to talk about this one. In this example, I changed to this X object. I created a new object and I copy it, and then I assign another property, and I'm saying, hey, give the bind, and the bind object is going to be S object essentially. But remember, this is what? This is an arrow function, and you have to think about this. So what we say, we just try to invoke it. So we say X object best prop. So when we invoke this, we have to ask ourselves, what is this? It's an arrow. So what is its parent? It's the window. So window equal window, it's going to be true. And in here we say X object best prop call, we pass undefined, but we shouldn't care about these things because it's arrow function, and we can assume that it's going to be window, and window equal window. Yeah, that's true. And in here we pass something else, and we initialize, we initializing this property. But since this is an arrow function, we assume that it's going to be immediately window. So window is not equal this is going to be false. Let's save and refresh. True, true, false, as you can see. Hope that makes sense. Let's move to the other example. Okay, let's guess this logs together. Essentially, we want this, we're asking this, and we're asking this one. Let's go for the first one. We have an object, and that object has the regular function, and then we just ask to run it. And who is calling this? Since it's regular function, we have to ask this question, and it's this.h. I mean, the object calls it, and this is why it's going to be object. So what is object.h? It's 30. So I'm saying that it's going to be 30 for this one. Next one, we have an object 2, and we have a function that we declare on the global, and it just console logged this h. Remember, right now it's point to the window right now, and window doesn't have any h property at the moment. But what we do in here, we say, hey, object 2, you will have the getH method, and getH property, and you are going to be a function, and that makes it the method right now. So on the object 2, we have getH method, and we try to access it. And since we know that it's regular function, we have to care about who is calling this. So who is calling this is object 2. Since it's object 2, this is going to point to object 2. It's not going to point to window. And the object 2, what is the h of object 2? It's 44. For the next one, what we do still on the object 2, we are on object 2, and we assign the best prop property, and it's going to be an object, right? And this object has its own function method like fn. We call this fn property, and it's an function. It's this function essentially, but we're not going to assume that it's I mean, it's come from window, but we're not going to assume that it's reside on the window again. We are going to assume that it's in here. And this best props object has also age property. And what we do, we say object2.bestProp.function. What we know is that this is a regular function. Since this is a regular function, what we do, we say who is calling this? And the one is calling is this one, this one. So we have to think like this. We say object2.bestProp. What is it? It's an object. So we are going to assume that this object is going to be this keyword. And what we ask is to console log. So when we say this object's age, it's going to point to 10. This is why we are going to get 10, because we have to think like this, not like this. If you think like this, you might say, oh, it's 44, but not. It's going to be this. If you remove this, let's see, let's first save, and as you can see, it's going to be this. If you remove this, what's going to be happen? What do you think? Well, it's going to say, hey, this object, do you have age property? No, it's not, so it's going to be undefined, as you can see. Let's go to other examples. This one is a bit tricky, but if you pay attention what I'm saying, you are going to able to solve it easily. I will change the code a bit so that you can understand it better if this confuses you, but let's just move together. This one, what we do, we call the function, and remember it's a regular function, and it's going to return this one. And what is this one? It's this arrow function. But let's do this. This leaves, it has this that is about this function. And if we do like this, if we do this and another this, which is arrow, arrow function, this keyword is lives in here. And what we do, we return this, right? And what we do in here, exactly the same. I'm doing this so that you can understand it better. So back to here, when we do smart object this, and since this is a regular function, we are going to ask ourselves who is calling this, and this one is calling this. So this will point to smart object. And then we immediately returning to this arrow function. Remember, the arrow function is going to care about the parent. So in this case, the parent is smart object. Now let's guess these things. What we do, we say, hey, is the smart object equal this one? Remember, this is a arrow function, and we invoke the function. And when we invoke it, we return this keyword. And we said that this keyword is going to be smart object because it's going to relate with this parent. And the parent, this keyword is this one. That's why this is going to be true, we say, okay? Next one, we say window. Is window equal this one? Remember, before we did similar thing, and when we do on the arrow call, in fact we pass nothing, and when we pass nothing, normally it would be what? Undefined, and it would be a window. But in here it's arrow, so it's not going to be window, it's going to be still smart object. Remember, it doesn't obey this rule. And below we say, hey, run it again and give the window function. Even though we give the window, it's not going to obey. Remember, it's going to be what? It's going to be smart object because it's arrow function. The only thing that it cares is its parent, this keyword. And because of this, it's going to be false. In here, we are saying, hey, run this and give the window. Up until now, we said it's going to point to smart object, and we say, hey, it's going to be smart object. And we say, yes, it's going to be smart object. We say, now if we save, as you can see, it's true, false, false, true, true, false, false, true. While explaining these things, some other example comes in my mind. So I'm going to put in here, so please guess it. My question to you is this one. When we do window.sm, what do you think it's going to happen? Remember, sm is we do in here, and we run with the object with this one. What do you think about this example? Ready? I'm going to give you the answer. Well, at first you might think, oh, this is, we have explicitly who is calling this and it's window. You might start to think like this and you might say true or false. Well, what you should know, as I said before, this is declared with the const. And remember, const, whatever you declare is not going to bind to window. This is why you will get the error. And the error is going to be this one. So it doesn't recognize it. It doesn't, because window is not there. But what if we do var? Remember, var is going to be there. If I save, it's true. Because the arrow function doesn't care about who is calling it. This is why we are getting true. So the smart object is going to be smart object in this case. Down below, we do some additional stuff. So just comment these things and move to the next one. And now I want you to guess these things. Ready? Let's go. This one also a bit tricky. What we do, we have new object with a object and it's just a silly object. And in here we have smart object. We run the method and this is, remember what? It's normal function. And we call with the object with the a object. We pass an object in here and we assign to bm variable. So now we have to ask ourselves, since this is a normal function, we ask, hey, who is calling this? And the one is who is calling is, we call with this, but we pass a object. Because we pass a object, it's going to be what? It's going to be a object. And this one is going to refer its parent and also is going to be a object. Since this is a arrow function. This was the trick part. And now you will know that it's always going to be a object because of what? Because the arrow function. Because the arrow function doesn't care about call things. It doesn't going to change the result. When we say smart object is equal bm, well, it's going to be false. Why? Because we said it's going to be a object. Remember, this one is going to refer to this one because we return n. And this is, we say what? We say false. Next one, we say, is this equal to this? Well, it's going to be true. Why? Because we know that it's not going to change and it's going to be a object. Remember, it's this one and it's going to be a object, we said, and we return this. So we say true. And in here we say a object, is this equal this? Well, we don't have to care about these things because it's going to be true because it's arrow function. In here we say, is this equal to this? Well, you know that this is an a object and it's not going to be equal, so we say false. What about this one? This is the same. We try to trick the people like this, but no, we know how it's work. So it's going to be false. Why? Because it's not going to change with the call or with the bind or with whatever, because it's an arrow function that we're doing right now. Let's save, and false, true, true, false, true, true, and false, 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 false. What about I change this one to the like this? Remember we said it's not going to change. Is that thing we think this is true, what we assume? Well, we saw it before, but let's see in here also. If we save, it's going to be true, as you can see. Let's move the other example. In this example, we have two versions. One is here, two is here, and for now we are going to do version 1 and then we do version 2. In here we try to guess this one. So what's happened, we have an object in here, and what we do, we create a new object that called t, and we have connection between these two by doing object create, and s is going to be its parent, and what we do t.a equal 1 tb, and we try to call t.call them, right? If you don't understand this, I really explain all the details about in the prototype inheritance video. So if you don't understand this line of code truly, please watch this video. Now what we do, we try to access to t.call them. Since they have connection between each other, when we do t.call them, even though it doesn't exist in here, it's going to find with the prototype chain, and it will get the function and it's run it. And when we do, remember, we are going to ask ourselves who is calling this, and the one who is calling is t. So it's going to be t. So t.a, t.b. What is t? It's 1, 1. This is why it's going to be what? It's going to be 2. See, it's going to be 2. Let's move the other version. In here, you have to think more careful, because as you can see, it's an arrow function. And remember, arrow function is going to be parent, and in this case, the parent is going to be global, which is window object. And we just make the connection that just like above, and we try to access it. Since we are saying, hey, give me this function, I mean run this function, and since this is the arrow function, it doesn't care about who is call it, and this is going to be window, so window.a, window.b, and we have a, b, but remember, these are not going to be by the window. When we do this, it's going to be undefined plus undefined. So when you do something like this, let's just do undefined plus undefined. It's going to be none, not a number. Or you do this undefined, it's again going to give you not a number. Let's save and run this. As you can see, it's going to be null. What if I change this to var, or one of them? Well, I think you guess it, it's going to be still a number, because this one is number, but this one is undefined. If we do two of them, it's going to be 6, because when we do this, it's going to bind the window object. Hope that makes sense. And let's move to other example. This example about the class, and remember classes using the function construction behind the scene. It's a big tricky question, but try to think about it and guess the logs. Let's move together if you're ready. In here we have human class and cat class. We just make a new instance from them. And remember, we use new keyword, and this is extremely important. When we do this, for instance, it's going to run this constructor function, and we pass the kitty name, it's going to be kitty. So this kitty, f name means first name, it's going to be kitty because we pass kitty. And in here we have human Jack, and we create new instance of the human class. So in here what we do, we have f name just like the cat, but we're doing something important in here. We are saying, hey, go the method that we have and bind to this keyword that exists right now in here. I want you to bind it and override it. We are doing this in here, and it has two methods, as you can see. I'm just console log this in here so that we can understand better. in the guest 2. Just try to really understand these things. Okay, let's go here. What we do, we say human.talk. So human has the talk method and we say human.talk. Who is calling is human. So it's going to say, okay, the Jack is talking, right? So it should just say Jack is talking. In here, what we do, we say human.talk. So human talk, right? I mean, it's normally in here, but I'm showing you in here so that you can understand. Normally what it's going to happen, this instance is going to try to access this by prototype chain, and it will get it and it will run it. I mean, it's not running in here, but we just try to access it. So what we say, hey, take this function and like assign to here. We just like we're borrowing the method from the human instance. And now we do kitty.talk. Remember, in here we have this keyword, right? We try to access the this. So what is this is going to be? It's, remember, this is a regular function and it's going to be, hey, who is calling me? And it's kitty. What is kitty.fname? And it's kitty. So it should be what? It should be kitty is talking. Let's save and see. Okay, we save. As you can see, Jack is talking. We get in here Jack is talking because we had this keyword, and in here we have kitty is talking, and because we did this we have access to this method, and it's this keyword is going to point to kitty's name. This is the point. Let's move the other example. Okay, what we are doing here, we say, hey, human sit, get this method to me. And the human tries to get this method and it accesses because it's a human instance. But remember, we did something weird in here. I mean, it's not weird, but we can do something like this in here. So when the human, when we did this, remember, with new keyword, this code already ran. So human sit is going to get access this one. So when it get access this one, it's going to be, this is going to be the human. So when we say kitty.getSit is equal to this, and now when we say kitty.getSit run this one, you might say, hey, since this is a regular function, right? And you might say it's going to be, well, kitty is sitting, right? Let's see the log, what it's going to happen. I say, wow, what just happened? We got this as the human, which is fname Jack, and sit is function. And we got the second log as the sitting, Jack is sitting. But we initialize with the kitty. What's happened? Well, as I said before, when you run this code, and this code is being running, so when you say human.sit, it's get this one. So since it gets this one, we have bind. We bind this method to newly created method, and we assign that newly created method with the this keyword. In this case, it's going to be what? It's going to be human. I mean this one, because we're running in here. So it's going to be Jack. So when we say kitty.getSit, this keyword is going to point to the human. In this case, is going to be point to the Jack. I think you got the idea. And this is how it works if you do something like this. You might say, hey, if I do What about if I do call.cookie? Well, do you think it's going to be changed? Well, it's not going to be changed. Why? Because it's already run. You cannot change already. You cannot change again. Let's see. You see, you cannot change it because you're not running construction function again. You just try to access this method by the prototype chain and you get it. You initialize with the new keyword once in here. Hope that makes sense, and if it doesn't, don't worry, don't sweat, just let it go, you will get it soon. Let's move the other example. In this example, we have variable a, and we have function, and we have two objects, and we try to guess these things. In here, we just call the function and we invoke it. Since we invoked at the global, this keyword is going to be window, and this is why it's going to point this one. So it's going to be a global. In here, we call the function with the call and we pass the object one. Because we pass object one, this keyword is going to be object one. So object one's a is going to be what? It's going to be one. And similar concept in here, we just call the function and we call with the object 2, and object 2 is going to be this keyword, and we ask object 2a and it's 2. That's why we will get 2. In here we say object1.function. We invoke the object1 function. So what is object1 function? It's regular function. And since it's regular function, it's going to say, hey, who is calling me? And the one who is calling is object1. This is why it's going to be what? 1. In here we say object1.function call object2. We call the object1 with the object2. We pass object2 inside. This is why it's going to be what? It's going to be object2, this keyword. Because this is regular function, remember? And it's going to obey this one. And we pass the object2 and it's going to be 2. In here we say object1.function.call window, and we pass the window, and this will point to the window, and it's going to be a global. If you think I really moved fast about explaining, just try to pause and try to think a bit, and you will be really good to go, because we covered things like that. Let's save, and now as you can see, we got the correct answers. Let's move the other example. This question is similar to other one, but we have to be a bit careful. So we have variable a, we have function, and we have object, and then we do these things. This is a regular function, and we pass an argument and we invoke it, which means it's going to be function. In here we say object function, and we check the object function, it's just regular function. Remember, in here we're not invoking it, we just pass this function into here. So when we got this callback, this CB, it's going to be that function, and now we are invoking it. Since we invoke in here, and since this is just regular function, it's going to say, hey, who is calling me? And remember, situation like this, it's going to be what? It's going to be window. This is why this is going to be window. So essentially we ask window.a in here. So it's going to be a global because we declare with the var keyword. Hope that makes sense. And in here what we do, we say object function bind object. We create a new object. I mean, we create a new function, and that function keyword is going to be object, because we pass object in here, and because this is regular function and we do bind, and it's going to be what? It's going to be an object that this keyword is going to point object. And when we do standard function and we pass this, we still run it. In this case, don't make mistake. Don't say it's going to be window. It's not going to be window because we already declare in here. So there's no way to change it. When you say, for instance, const ttt equal to object function bind any and whatever, you cannot change this keyword because you declare it in here. And when you try to access this, no matter what, this keyword is going to be this one because you already decide this. And this is the same thing happen in here. And this is why it's not going to be window, it's going to be object. So essentially we ask object.a and it's what? It's 1. And this is going to be 1. Let's see. As you can see, we got the logs. Let's move the other example. In this example, when you run the code, I want this log print something. I mean, the something is going to be this one. How would you solve this? And if you're ready, let's go. Okay, we have function microphone and its constructor function, and we have start record method on its prototype, and blah blah blah. And in here we say, hey, give me the new microphone, and we save inside m variable, and this m is instance of the microphone, and it has first name property on it, and it's this one. And now we say, hey, run this function. And who is calling this? It's m. And the m is trying to go to run this, and it won't find at first, but it's going to check the prototype chain, and it will able to find this function, and then it will start to run. And this is a regular function, as you can see, which means it will have this keyword, and this keyword will point to what? Will point to m, because m is calling it, right? And now we have another function, and we call this function inside. So when you invoke this code is going to run, and then this code is going to run, and you immediately invoke it. You're not waiting. And then it's going to run this. And this is also the normal function. And since this is a normal function, it's this keyword will point what? Will point the window. Why? Because you're not saying anything. And just because it's going to point the window, it's going to be undefined, because on the window there is nothing such as first name. Let's save, and as you can see, we get undefined. Now, I think the easiest way to solve this, we can say call. Also, there are so many ways you can find, but you can solve like this, and you pass this keyword, because this keyword is going to point to m. Remember? Inside here. So when we do this, we say, hey, run this, and this keyword is going to be m. So essentially, now it's not a window, it's going to be m. In this situation, we save, we run, you see, we get this one. The second way to solve this, I can also do, let's remove, and I can do like this. I do const and equal. Remember, this is now arrow function, and arrow function is going to take its parent, this keyword. When you invoke it like this, it doesn't care like window or whatever. It's just going to apply whatever rule it has, and in this case it's going to take from the parent. And we save, we run, you see, we get the same output, because we convert it to arrow function. Also, you can do with the bind some fancy things, but these two are essentially the easiest way. Let's move the other example. Let's check this code. We have class person, and we do some stuff, and I want you to guess these logs. And I'm saying if you find any error, don't try to fix it. And in here, I want you to fix the error. So basically, don't fix error for this one if you find any, and you're going to fix this for this one. Let's do this together. Okay, in here we just have a person. In here we make an instance of it, and then we run it. And what's the log we say? Well, the log is going to be p.run, and since this is a normal function and it's going to point to p, and then it's going to try to p.can run please. Does p have this property? No, p doesn't have this property, so it's going to be undefined. Let's just comment these things so that we can test it. As you can see, it's point to undefined. Next one. In here we create new instance and we assign the property, and then we try to run. So basically, who is running this is p2, and does p2 have this? Yes, it has, and it's going to print this one. And we save, we run, and it's print this one. Let's move the other one. In here we are creating an object by ourselves, and we have property like this. And then I do p3.run. Hey, what I'm doing like this, like p3.run, but p3 doesn't have run, right? So in this case, it should throw an error. Let's see. Well, yeah, we got the error. Let's move the other example. In here we have an object, and that object is again has a property. And then we do p4.run so that we can run it to not making the same mistake like above. And we do person run bind p4. What do you think it's going to happen? Well, if you see that we try to bind, right? But if you notice, we not put new keyword. Well, if you save like this, it's going to give you the error, because when we do new, it's going to create an object and it's going to return that object. Since it doesn't return any object in here, it says, hey, undefined doesn't have bind, because it doesn't return anything in here. So to fix this, we should do like new person like that. So when we save, sorry, my mistake, like this. And now we can fix it like this. And it's going to be print this one because we pass in here. I hope that makes sense. In this question, I want you to guess these logs. So essentially we have an object, and also we have another object in here, and we have a bunch of function, and we call this functions. Ready? Let's go. Now we do fix one, and we call from here, and it's a regular function, and it's going to say, hey, okay, this is going to point this, and this dot window crash. So since we have this, it's going to print this one. Next one, we say fix2, and same logic, but we say this dot handle anything. But notice that this object doesn't have such as this property, so it's going to say undefined. In here we say run this, but notice this is a function, but after it we do bind, and we bind the object, smart object, to it. So since we bind something to it, remember, it's going to be, it's this keyword. So now we have this keyword that is smart object. And even though you call like this, it doesn't going to affect, and it's going to print this one, since we ask to print this one. So basically this keyword in here, it's going to be smart object. Let's save and let's run. And yeah, we got the, as always, undefined, and the other, this one. Hope that makes sense. Let's move to other example. In this example, think this like two versions. One version is here, one version is this one, and the second one is this one. And we are going to answer these questions. So let's check first one. So what we do, we call the test one, and it's going to run. And in here, we call the report name with the silly object. And this is an object, and this is the function. And this keyword is going to point silly object. And this is why it's going to be test one. Let's start with this one. In here, we call the test one and we initialize it, and notice that we have object, and that object, silly object dot report name, we try to invoke its function inside here. So this is a regular function, and this keyword is going to point whoever call it. So it's going to point the silly object. So what is silly object? Is this one. And we say this dot function name, and it's going to be silly name. It's not going to point this one. Okay, this is a variable. This is not this dot function name. Don't get confused. Now, when we save, when we run, we are going to get silly name, just like you see. The second one, when we check the second example, we just run the test2 function, and we have still the same object, similar one. And now we do silly object dot report name. We run this, but notice that this is the arrow function. And arrow function doesn't care about who is calling it. It's going to point to what? It's going to point to its parent. In this case, its parent? It's test2 function. So what is test2? It's a regular function, as you can see, it's regular function. So it has this keyword. So this keyword is going to be what? It's going to be window, because we run like this, right? So, and this one has its own this, and it's also going to be parents, which is window. And this is why it's going to be window. And when we check this dot function name, window dot function name, window doesn't have anything like that. It's going to be undefined. Let's save and check this. We got the silly name, we got the undefined. If we had something like this, var function name, let's say ttt, and save, now we got this. Let's move the next one. In this example, I want you to answer these two questions. So if you're ready, let's get started. We have var model x, and we have this object, and we try to, let's just comment this one first. We say, hey, old phone dot get this function, and we invoke the function. And this function, remember, it's arrow, and it's going to point to the parent. What is the parent? It's window. So this should give us to x, not this one. It's going to point to x. So save. So you can see it's pointing to x. Now the next one is this one. What we do, we copy the old phone, and then we override its model to Apple, and then we run the function. Now again, this is the arrow function, and it doesn't care who is calling it, and it's going to point to parent. In this case, it's going to point to window. So we save, we run, we got the x. Let's go to the other example. In this question, we have two versions, and I want you to guess these two locks. Ready? Let's go. Now we invoke the function, and we have const model at the top, and we have function. We invoke this function, and let's see, we say this is a regular function. Who is calling this? It's father car. So this is why it's going to be this one, because we ask this one. So this keyword is going to be father car. So it should print this one. The next one, when we check, we have the arrow function, and arrow function is going to point its parent. In this case, the parent is this one. So this keyword. So what's this keyword in here? Well, it's going to depend who is calling this, right? Because it's normal function. So who is calling? Window calling. So this is why it's going to be window. So window.model, do we have model on window? No, we don't. This won't be on the window. So we will get undefined. Let's check. As you can see, we got Ferrari and we got undefined. Let's go to version 2. Version 2 also really similar, but what we do, we change this to const to var. And now we just invoke the function, and now we do the same, and we will get this one because it's regular function. And in here we have arrow function. The arrow function is going to point to parent. In this case, it's comparing cars. So who is calling this? It's window. So does window have model? Yes, it does, because we do with the var, and it's going to point this one. So when we save, when we run, it's going to be this one. I hope that makes sense for you. If you think that I'm really going too fast for these examples, you can really stop and think by yourself. You will get it because we cover everything. Okay guys, finally we finished this huge, massive, complex topic. I hope after watching this video, now it's crystal clear for you this keyword concept, and I hope this was aha moment for you as well. If you appreciate what I'm doing, please don't forget to support. Thank you for having me. Have a good day.